He opposes external interference and condemns sanctions imposed under hegemonism. He applauds China's achievements. He opposes external interference and condemns sanctions imposed under hegemonism. He applauds China's achievements as an inspiration to developing countries and expects China-Africa cooperation to accelerate Africa's development. In this episode of Leaders Talk, we have an exclusive interview with Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki in Beijing during his state visit to China.
Hello and welcome to Leaders Talk, where we meet leaders, thinkers, and trailblazers. I'm Zhou Yun. Our guest today is President of Eritrea, Mr. Isaias Afwerki. This year marks the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Eritrea. As a longtime friend of China, how does he see these bilateral relations moving forward? How does he understand the regional as well as international context? And what is his vision on the new chapter of China-Africa cooperation? Today, we're going to find those answers from an interview with the President of Eritrea. Mr. President, thank you so much for joining us today on Leaders Talk. Well, one of the highlights of your visit this time to China is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping yesterday. So what are the major takeaways from this meeting?
I think we can look at it from a broader context. And the broader context is the relationship between China and Eritrea. And it has developed to a strategic partnership on a number of issues. My meeting with President Xi Jinping is a continuation of that long-standing history of partnership, strategic partnership with China.
Mr. President, this year marks the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Eritrea. And during your meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, he quoted a Chinese proverb, 32里, which means at the age of 30, one planted his or her feet firm upon the ground. So for you, how would you define these bilateral relations, and how do you think we can not only enhance the traditional political friendship, but also inject new impetus into the economic cooperation between the two sides?
From our perspective, it's a historic mission of humanity. Why the People's Republic of China stood on the right of the Eritrean people to independence immediately after independence, 1949, is historic. Independence of nations and peoples, which is the foundation of any cooperation program, economic or otherwise. That is the foundation of the relationship. Now, it's not only Eritrea and China, but we work together to influence the emergence of a new global order, which is again a mission for humanity. And China stands on the side of the peoples of the world. Eritrea, in solidarity with China, continues to uphold a mission for humanity.
Located in the Horn of Africa, the East African nation Eritrea shares a land border with Sudan, Ethiopia, and Djibouti, and a maritime border with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Known as the Pearl of the Red Sea because of its spectacular landscape and colorful culture, Eritrea is a gateway to both Africa and Asia and was an important hub on the ancient maritime Silk Road. The China-Eritrea friendship has stood the test of time, with the two nations always supporting each other. In 2022, President Xi Jinping and President Isaias agreed to upgrade the China-Eritrea relationship to a strategic partnership. The two countries are in close communication and coordination on international and regional affairs, and the deepened political mutual trust has seen fruitful results through pragmatic cooperation.
Over the past decades, both countries have stood the test of time and have shared will and vow. In the very recent conflict in Sudan, Eritrean government has provided assistance to the evacuation and transfer of Chinese citizens, and at the same time, Chinese people have also helped Eritrean citizens to evacuate from Sudan. So what is your take on this evacuation, and how do you see this mutual cooperation between the two sides in the face of crisis?
Conflict erupted. It was out of the question that we need to have arrangements on doing this job. It's our commitment to our common cause to work together And in difficult times, like this sad situation we have in the Sudan, the cooperation between Eritrea and China is a natural phenomenon. I mean, Chinese in Eritrea or Chinese crossing from the Sudanese border to Eritrea have all the right to be supported, and Eritrea did its obligation in providing the support required by Chinese citizens who were trapped in the conflict in the Sudan. And similarly, China would do the same thing to uphold its moral obligation to support people under distress. Conflict situations definitely require a moral commitment of everybody, humanitarily support citizens of one or another nation held or trapped in a situation like the one we have in the Sudan, which is very sad again.
Mr. President, in a very recent televised speech, you have announced the opening of the Eritrean border to refugees who are fleeing from Sudan during this conflict. What is the rationale behind such a decision?
This is a humanitarian case. This is a humanitarian situation. You don't need to be obliged. You need to be reminded by anybody to provide any support that is required of you, and no visas, no permissions. Anyone willing to cross the border to Eritrea can freely or safely imagine that everything is open for the travel, saving human lives, saving people from a situation like the one in the Sudan.
Mr. President, let's get back to this profound relationship between China and Eritrea, because over the past years we have saw so many memorable testaments of this solid foundation between the two countries. I remember in 2008 during the Wenchuan earthquake. At that time, I was very young, but I remember vividly, at that time, both you, Mr. President, and also your people has made donations to the people in the earthquake, and also have expressed your willingness to help to tide over these difficulties together with the Chinese people. How do you see this mutual support, mutual assistance between the people of both countries?
It's simply a convergence of values, value systems of communities, nations, peoples are what bring people together. We would like to see humanity move towards fair and justice, for a situation of justice. These values are what bring people together. It's not only China and Eritrea, but people everywhere in the world, Latin America, Asia, Europe, the Americas. We need a new world order. What China has achieved, not only domestically but globally, makes a lot of sense to many people across the world. And we need to work in solidarity to make more contributions for the future of humanity. We are not in the Stone Age. We are not in the Middle Age. We are moving ahead towards a new century, a new era for humanity. And complementarity and cooperation is the name of the game. No one nation, no one people will survive without complementarity and without solidarity. What China has done, what China has contributed to the global transformation is based on this concept of solidarity.
Mr. President, those voices who are now seeing China's rise as a threat, not as an opportunity, how do you see those moves to contain China?
In history and say the imbalances globally, conflicts here and there, world wars, and continuous confrontations have been the philosophies of many minorities who have tried to dominate. It's hegemonistic. It's dominating as an attitude to suppress peoples and nations and finally control or dominate global economy. It's been a misguided policy. It's a misconception of realities. It's misunderstanding of history. Now we see the future is very bright. The future is very bright because of Chinese achievement. China has proven to everybody in the world, the marginalized and those who entertain the ideas of domination, this is no more the rule of the game. People of the world will have to cooperate. The new world order is an order of cooperation, complementarity, and working together. It's not a world order for domination or hegemony.
Well, during the meeting yesterday, President Xi has said that Africa is a very promising land. And he also emphasized that given the current circumstance, it is more imperative than ever for China and Africa to enhance solidarity as well as cooperation. So, Mr. President, as the head of an African country, how do you think we can bring this bilateral relations between China and Africa to an even higher level?
That's one critical challenge we see today. In spite of all the achievements, in spite of so many things happening globally, Africa remains to be a marginalized continent. Marginalized continent because of its economies. It's a subsistence economy. It's a very backward economy. You hear about famine here, famine there, conflict here, conflict there. All sorts of bad things are there. Now, Africa needs to be extricated from this state of affairs. How can Africa do it? It's the responsibility of the people in Africa. But definitely, Chinese contributions are very significant. For Africa to extricate itself, what China has done the last few decades in transforming the reality of Africa is only a beginning. And hopefully, the solidarity between China and Africa will create a synergy that will accelerate the process of extricating Africa from marginalization.
Mr. President, in 2021, Eritrea signed a MOU with China on Belt and Road Initiative. Well, this initiative was proposed by China, but the benefits has been shared by the world. But at the same time, I think you've heard some of the different voices, especially from Western media, which accuse China of spreading the so-called debt trap. So what's your response to these claims, and how do you understand the Belt and Road Initiative?
If there is any debt trap, it's the responsibility of those nations in Africa who have mismanaged their economies. You can't go back and blame China for any mishap. If you are planning an economy, if you have resources to mobilize, if you have goals to achieve in any area, in any sector, definitely you will have to have the correct policies, and you have to have the institutional mechanism to implement this. China would be willing to support and help, allow governments to borrow money, but ultimately the management issue falls on the responsibility of the African side. Now, blaming China for debt traps is simply defaming the achievements and probably trying to create some rift between African and Chinese contributions in the solidarity that has achieved the economic development we see today. One of the worrying things for these hegemonistic forces globally is China working with Africa to extricate Africa from the marginalization that it exists today and move forward in solidarity with the peoples of Africa. If there are mistakes done by African government, debt traps will have to be managed by learning from mistakes and correcting the handling of the economies that have failed into this trap.
Mr. President, Eritrea is heavily sanctioned by the United States and some other countries. What do you think are the implications of those sanctions? And now it seems there's a tendency for some countries to label some developing countries as undemocratic and then use them as excuses to impose sanctions. How would you respond to that?
It's the sick mind of hegemonistic powers. It's sick because why impose sanctions? What is the legality of imposing any sanction? What is the morality of imposing any sanction on any nation? It's a big question mark. It's not only sanctioning Eritrea, but sanctioning all those who uphold their independence and sovereignty. If they don't like you, they will impose sanctions. They will try to cripple your economies. They will try to incite conflict. They will try to destabilize and interfere. And they have no moral or legal high ground to come and intervene or even impose sanctions on any nation. Eritrea has been a victim of this because for the last 80 years, they have had their own fancy ideas about dominating Africa by regionalizing Africa into influence or centers of influence. And everyone who disagrees with their philosophy and their sick mind will have to be punished, punish and punish and punish, demonize, impose sanctions. We're fed up of this stupid idea of imposing your will on others' sovereign and independent choice and trying to keep their economies and try to create the disruptions here and there. One of the reasons for trying to create a rift between China and Africa is to promote their own agenda of dominance. And anyone who disagrees with them will have to be punished. For us, been a long experience, we've been able to face this challenge, and in solidarity with our partners in Africa, with China, Asia, Europe, Americas, definitely this defunct idea to me will be history no matter of one decade.
Mr. President, give us an idea about what kind of impact has those sanctions made on the development of your country and also the livelihood of your people?
No, it's not deniable. It does disrupt economic development here or there. It cripples abilities here and there. But that's one of the challenges. It's an uphill struggle. You can't build a nation in a very smooth manner without their disruptions. Imagine the history of the Chinese people, where from they have come and where they are now and where they are going. The same thing for Africa. A major challenge for liberation of peoples, independence of nations, and ultimately economic development to change the qualities of life of them cannot happen without challenge. The damage done to our economy through these sanctions have been tremendous, but we say we have learned our lesson. It has made us more resilient and more determined to continue our struggle, endeavor to change the quality of life by improving our economy.
The problem here is many Western countries, the States and also other countries, they're taking sanctions as the kind of solution to resolve, crises and issues.
The advantage of that attitude, that Sikh attitude, is it has inspired people more committed to liberation, independence.
I think you are a believer of what doesn't destroy you, only make you stronger. Right?
It does. I'd like to see everyone making his contributions in life. Your aspirations, your goodwill is your own emotional resource. But the fact that someone is coming and bullying you, someone is harassing you, someone is putting sanctions on you, he's training you. It's a matter of getting the training in a negative manner. Ultimately, you become a full person. It's a learning experience for someone to go through these experiences. And you can't thank them definitely for their ugly attitudes, but definitely you have learned your lesson by going through the process of facing the challenge created by this dominating force. You have both sides of the coin. You have to see the advantage and the disadvantage. I could have done better without that, but I have learned a lot by their bullying attitudes and their sanctions that have crippled my ability to move forward.
Mr. President, you share a very special bond with China because about 50 years ago, you spent 2 years studying here in the country. And I read from a book which depicted you as a 21-year-old young man, very tall, who doesn't talk much, kind of shy, but who studies very hard and think very actively. So how do you think that experience has influenced you? And is there any interesting or impressive stories that you can share with us?
It was a moment where a young man of 20 could have learned so many things in a very short period of time. And that has shaped lives, my life, the lives of the colleagues who were with me. It was the foundation of the relationship.
Mr. President, you just said you learned a lot from here. What would be the biggest lesson that you learned from here that still have an impact when governing your country today?
It's a commitment to the people now. You can go and listen to President Xi Jinping, listen to Chinese leaders here and there. It's their commitment to their people. They have committed their lives to change the quality of life of their people. And the achievement they have done has been tremendous. You see, that commitment is what has made China happen in a manner, because the commitment of the people, the leadership level, the commitment of the Communist Party to change the quality of life here, the awareness of the Chinese people to change their reality to where they are now is a model for success everywhere, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, America. So it's really the outcome, the value system that was there, that motivated young people and many everywhere in the world, is what values my presence here in China.
Well, speaking of the motivation of young people, Mr. President, we heard that you once took not only your own kids, but also many teenagers in Eritrea to visit events at the Chinese embassy in Eritrea. So why is that? And especially, why do you think it is important for young people to gain an understanding and knowledge of China at an early age?
If you have a value system, if this value system is appreciated, goals that will have to be achieved for the sake of humanity, how do you cultivate? Early age is the secret. I call it the motor for the survival and the movement of nations. Educate every young person to commit himself to the quality of life or the quality of life of the people. Commitment to those values is critical to any developmental issue that may arise when a young man or a young woman in one nation grow up with that motivation. Motivation is very critical.
How do you see the path of China's modernization?
The achievement in China have proven that the modernization and industrialization of China has been the secret of what we see today happen. What that sends as a message, it's a model for other continents and other peoples to see to China as a model. How has China achieved this? This underdeveloped country, this country that was considered to be backward by all standards in the era after the Second World War, now go back and see what has happened. Why has this modernization and industrialization of China transformed lives? Why is China now engaged in even transforming the global order? It's inspiring to see the achievements of China. It's inspiring particularly for the people in Africa. They can learn a lot from this experience.
Well, apart from the cooperation in sectors including agriculture, infrastructure, mineral mining, etc., the cooperation in cultural and people-to-people exchanges are also gaining momentum between the two countries. And that's exciting to you as well, right, Mr. President?
It's very comprehensive. It's comprehensive. It may involve a number of economic sectors: infrastructure, energy, water resource, agriculture, tourism. Sectors, industries will have to be developed. But again, the solidarity will have to include the soft
power.
Aspect, the soft power. The soft power
exactly.
is
for
the cultural
media
exchange. The cultural exchange is very critical. Now, it's not only a matter of solidarity, working together on economic sectors, developmental programs here and there, but the cultural exchange of peoples everywhere is very critical. Mm-hmm. You share and appreciate values. Sharing and appreciating values gives you more strength. It multiplies your capability of doing things. You have to communicate. You have to tell each other stories. You have to find and share values.
Speaking of culture, Mr. President, you have a very in-depth and comprehensive knowledge of Chinese culture and history. So is there some special you would like to share with us?
I modestly say I know very little, even though I am eager to know more about this culture. And there is no end, there is no limit to what you can learn from this culture. It's the achievement of generations of thousands of years. Have you been to the Great Wall of China?
How's it feel?
Go and see that achievement. Go and see every stone, every piece of stone, image carved on stone. Go and see the achievements of Chinese art. Go and see the achievements of Chinese history and culture. There are so many things to learn from the Chinese history, from Chinese civilization, and modern achievements of China.
Mr. President, you first came to China when you were very young, in your 20s, and then afterwards you have also visited China a couple of times, and now this time again. So what are some of the major changes that you have witnessed with your own eyes?
My yardstick is see, even from very far away, following the developments in China. I've been here last probably 2005,
right.
Almost 18 years now.
Yes.
2005, I've seen with my own eyes so many things. Now I come back and see the same thing, dramatic. It's beyond my own expectations. The ultimate benefit is it's inspiring message that gives you more confidence, more commitment to what you have to do. And I say thank you for your achievements. You have learned We have learned a lot. We can see the future from here.
Can you share with us some details? For instance, some of the changes that you have witnessed, as you mentioned, with your own eyes, that you think are particularly inspiring to you when you governing your country?
I can talk about that for hours.
Maybe just one?
Go and see the infrastructural achievement, the achievements in technology. Go and see a number of other sensitive areas. You have Huawei, for example, okay? Huawei is an industry. Huawei has made tremendous achievements in the electronics industry. The LCD watches were not here in China when I was here 50 years ago. Now I can see Huawei is providing global markets with the latest technologies in electronics. We expect more to happen in the future. So that's why I say it's a very long story. It will take so many hours for me to talk about these detailed achievements here in China.
Well, Eritrea is known as the Pearl of the Red Sea, but due to this geographical distance, some Chinese people may not be very familiar with this country. So, Mr. President, how would you present Eritrea to our Chinese viewers here who are interested to visit there in the near future?
I've always adopted an attitude. I say, come and see. I wish Chinese people will come and see, not only Eritrea, but visit Africa. So it's part of the cultural exchange, it's part of the exchange of humanity. I would like to invite everyone to come and see, and then make your judgments.
Well, hopefully, thank you so much for your invitation. Hopefully, personally, I could really visit Eritrea myself and to go and see.
You have an open invitation to visit Eritrea.
I will. Thank you so much for taking our interview. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.